I'm not ashamed.
Did Tiglath-Pileser help or not help Ahaz? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 2 Chronicles on walking through the Bible.
The glory of his cross.
Today we're going to be discussing 2 Chronicles chapter 28, verses 16 to 27. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, turn to 2 Chronicles chapter 28, verse 16. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry, just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 2 Chronicles chapter 28, beginning at verse 16. At the same time, King Ahaz sent to the kings of Assyria to help him, for again the Edomites had come, attacked Judah, and carried away the captives. The Philistines also had invaded the cities of the lowland and of the south of Judah, and had taken Bethshemesh, Aijalon, Gederoth, Soko with its villages, Timnah with its villages, and Gimzo with its villages, and they dwelt there. For the Lord brought Judah low because of Ahaz king of Israel, for he had encouraged moral decline in Judah, and had been continually unfaithful to the Lord. Also Tiglath-Pileser king of Assyria came to him and distressed him, and did not assist him. For Ahaz took part of the treasures from the house of the Lord, and from the house of the king, and from the leaders, and he gave it to the king of Assyria. But he did not help him. Now in the time of his distress, King Ahaz became increasingly unfaithful to the Lord. This is that King Ahaz. For he sacrificed to the gods of Damascus, which had defeated him, saying, Because the gods of the kings of Syria helped them, I will sacrifice to them that they may help me. But they were the ruin of him and all Israel. So Ahaz gathered the articles of the house of God, cut them in pieces, the articles of the house of God, shut up the doors of the house of the Lord, and made for himself altars in every corner of Jerusalem. And in every single city of Judah he made places to burn incense to other gods, and provoked to anger the Lord God of his fathers. Now the rest of the acts and all his ways, from first to last, indeed they are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. So Ahaz rested with his fathers, and they buried him in the city in Jerusalem, but they did not bring him into the tombs of the kings of Israel. Then Hezekiah his son reigned in his place. Ahaz is an especially wicked king in Judah. For almost 100 years since the days of Jehoram and Athaliah, Judah had not experienced a king like this. But Ahaz was described to be more like the kings of Israel than any king in Judah. And we know, if you're being described like the kings of Israel, God isn't going to be happy, for they were especially wicked. Ahaz served other gods, he was an idolater to the true God, and he even practiced the abomination of human sacrifice. Thus God used Israel and Syria to judge Judah, even though both those nations would soon be judged themselves by Assyria. Israel killed about 40% of Ahaz's army in battle, as well as drove Judah from some of its expanded territory, such as the city of Elath, which bordered the Red Sea to the south, and gave it access to the waters to the south. This severely weakened Ahaz, but through it all, God was not going to allow Israel to completely overtake Judah or depose Ahaz. We could say that this was meant to be Judah's wake-up call. Now Ahaz could have done one of two things. He could have repented, returned to God and rely on him for protection, or he could have continued on the path that he's on. But since he was weakened, depend on another nation for protection. And Ahaz, being Ahaz, chose the latter and sought an alliance with the king of Assyria, Tiglath-Pileser, to not only deal with his problem of Israel and Syria, but also with the Edomites, who would be attacking from his south, and the Philistines, who were attacking from his west. These nations had been subdued by righteous kings of Judah from the past, but Ahaz was not righteous, so God allowed these other nations to afflict Judah as well. Now God was displeased with Ahaz's decision, and so he sent the prophet Isaiah, yes, that Isaiah, to warn Ahaz that Israel and Syria would not defeat him. In fact, they would be defeated, and that there was no need for an alliance with Assyria in order for him to be saved. This encounter is recorded for us in Isaiah 7, and it's in this context that we get the famous Emmanuel prophecy about the virgin birth of Jesus in Isaiah 7:14. Ahaz was the one who was told to ask for a sign. Ahaz was the one who refused, saying that he didn't want to test God, when in fact he didn't want to be bothered. and Ahaz is the one who heard this Emmanuel prophecy and sign for the first time. We'll discuss more of what this prophecy means, the Lord willing, when we study Isaiah. But for now, let's just understand that's what's going on here in 2 Chronicles 28. It is what precipitated that sign being given in the first place. Ahaz didn't listen to God, choosing instead to try and pay the king of Assyria for protection, using part of the treasuries of the Lord, the treasuries of the king, and the treasuries of the leaders, but Tiglath-Pileser didn't help him. Now, if you remember back to our study of 2 Kings, this might be confusing. For those who don't remember, though, let's read the parallel passage back in 2 Kings 16, verses 7 to 9. So Ahaz sent messengers to Tiglath-Pileser, king of Assyria, saying, I am your servant and your son. Come up and save me from the hand of the king of Syria and from the hand of the king of Israel, who rise up against me. And Ahaz took the silver and gold that was found in the house of the Lord and the treasuries of the king's house, and sent it as a present to the king of Assyria. So the king of Assyria heeded him, for the king of Assyria went up against Damascus and took it, carried its people captive to Kir, and killed Rezin. The confusion arises because the writer of 2 Kings makes it seem like Assyria helps Ahaz, while the writer of 2 Chronicles says that he didn't. Is this a contradiction? Now when you pay close attention, in 2 Kings, who did Ahaz seek help from Assyria for? Dealing with Israel and Syria. In this, Tiglath-Pileser helped Ahaz, for he was planning on attacking these two nations anyway. Thus, Assyria wasn't really doing it to help Judah, but to help itself, even if a byproduct of that helped Judah. In 2 Chronicles, who did Ahaz seek help from Assyria for? The attacks made by the Edomites and the Philistines against Judah. Assyria did not help Ahaz for this, for at the time Assyria had no interest in taking sides with Judah in its battles against other nations. Assyria at that time wanted total control, not alliances. Moreover, Judah's position was not one of strength, for remember, their army had been decimated under Ahaz. So what reason would Assyria have for an alliance with a weak nation? Why not just take over the weak nation and assert control of the situation that way? And of course, we know that God wasn't ready to send Judah off into captivity, so through God's providence, that didn't happen. What did happen, though, is that Assyria didn't distress him, basically making Judah into a vassal state of Assyria. God had warned Ahaz not to align himself with Assyria, for bad would come from it, an emboldened neighbor on his border. Ahaz didn't listen, and is now suffering the consequences. In actuality, then, what we have is 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles telling us about two different events. Ahaz did seek help from Assyria. When it came to Israel and Syria, Assyria helped. But the writer of 2 Kings is silent about not receiving help concerning the Edomites and Philistines. On the other hand, the writer of 2 Chronicles is silent about the aid against Israel and Syria, focusing instead on the lack of help against the Edomites and Philistines. And so, since they aren't speaking on the same thing, they aren't in contradiction. Now, you would think that such a reproof by God would lead Ahaz to repent, but we need to remember, Ahaz didn't fall away from serving God. It doesn't seem he served God at all. He wanted to serve other gods, for they didn't demand anything of him like Jehovah did, for those other gods were man-made. The problem was, for Ahaz, the gods he was worshiping weren't helping him win victory. So perhaps if I worship other gods, gods that had been successful in battle, these gods would help me. So Ahaz turned to the gods of Damascus, Syria, for he felt that these gods must have been helping Syria when they defeated him. Never mind the fact that Assyria had just defeated Syria, according to the parallel passage in 2 Kings 16. Perhaps Ahaz thought that that defeat was just a minor setback for these gods, and since Assyria wasn't going to ally with him, perhaps the gods of Syria would be able to turn things around once Ahaz worshipped them. Of course, we know that such thinking is utter nonsense, for these gods were man-made and could do nothing. Jehovah was the reason Syria was victorious, for he was judging Judah. And Jehovah was the reason that Assyria was successful against Israel, Assyria, and Judah, for he was judging all three of these nations. Their success had nothing to do with their idol worship. In fact, their idol worship was the reason for their judgment. Ahaz's descent further on down into idolatry was the ruin for Judah, for it caused her to go deeper and deeper into sin. Not since the days of Athaliah had the temple of God been closed to worship, but Ahaz did that, dismantling many of the articles of the house of God. Ahaz was so mad at Jehovah and so antagonistic towards him that he erected altars to false gods in every corner of Jerusalem and set up high places throughout Judah. Had this continued much longer, Judah would have likely been judged much earlier than she was. Thankfully for Judah, Ahaz died, having reigned 16 years over them, bringing our timeline down to about 723 BC. Hezekiah, his son, would reign in his place, a reign we'll begin to cover, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 2 Chronicles chapter 29, verses 1 to 19, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.
Of his cross.